called Reality Check with Craig Price.
Oh, right. Sorry.
I'm an idiot.
4
minutes in and I'm already wrong. I'm like a monkey. Hello, look at me. Craig, shut up.
Hey, I need you guys to do these things.
You're like a beautiful mind. I'm more like Forrest Gump. So welcome to another Reality Check with Craig Price. I am your host, Craig Price. Got a great, tremendous show for you this week. National Speaker Association Hall of Famer Scott McKain joins me to talk motivation. Does that make Scott a motivational speaker? No, it doesn't, because if you've read my book and you've watched me do keynotes and you've listened to the podcast and you've read my blogs and you've done all that, right? Right? All right, for the sake of argument, I'll just assume that is an actual fact. So you absorb all the information, that all that is Craig. You start to realize, well, Craig is not a friend of motivational speakers. I don't like motivational speakers. I don't find the value in motivational speakers. And quite frankly, they don't find the value in me, which is fine. I don't go to, holistic crystal worshiping situations. They rarely go to the smart business folks that I deal with, and the smart association folks that I deal with. In fact, I get hired a lot of the times because they had a motivational speaker the year before and nobody liked them. And so they bring in me, who kind of like the anti-motivational speaker. Though I don't demotivate, that'd be sad. Everybody came in, cranked up and excited to go back to work, and then they listen to me and they head out, wanting to kill themselves. That does not happen. Well, I can't guarantee that they don't, want to kill me, but they had a great time, they have fun, and they learn some things. So why would I bring a motivational speaker on? Well, I didn't. I brought in Scott McKain. Scott McKain is a content-driven speaker who happens to be motivational. It does exist. He is rare, I grant you. He is very rare that you find such a motivating guy, yet has a lot of content and information and factual information, research-based and customized for the events that he's at. He's a professional, folks. He's not in the Hall of Fame because they think he's cute. He is in the Hall of Fame because he is a tremendous speaker. He's good at what he does. And yet, despite all that, he doesn't need to be the goofy, motivational, bullshistic medicine guy. He's very down to earth. When you listen to him, he's a very soothing voice. It kind of irritates me, quite frankly. He's got such a nice, smooth voice. But he's a real tremendous guy. I appreciate him taking time to talk to me. And no, we did not fight. We did that earlier when we first met. We were put together, and we talk about this in the podcast. You'll hear. We put together to a point counterpoint. And the first time I ever met him, we argued motivation versus content. Guess which side I was on. So without any further ado, let me give you the great Hall of Fame, Scott McKain. No, well, see, this is the problem with having you here, is that you are intimidating because you've got the golden velvet pipes. I mean, I sound like some guy that was just going to like... Who's this schmuck we got off the street?
But that's what conversation is. I mean, it runs me into problems sometimes because people think, oh, you sound like a disc jockey. Well, it's the only voice I've ever had. I don't know how to sound like anything else, I guess.
It could be worse. You could be like the homeless guy that they just put him out of the thing, and he had the golden pipes, and what did it do for him?
I may still end up there. You never know. I mean,
but you really do have the smooth sounds, and so you're very fortunate and
very blessed. Yeah.
And of course,
at 11:02. Good morning.
It's Reality Check with Craig Price. At the top and the bottom of the hour, we're going to get to the traffic. Yeah. So you've got that nice voice, but then you're also intimidating because, and for those of you who don't know, I'm here with Scott McKain, Hall of Famer. Yeah, not just regular. You're my second Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
I had Dana Steele on as a Texas radio Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
But you are a speaking Hall of Famer. You're a Hall of Fame of speaking, which is not intimidating at all.
Which means I've peaked. It's all downhill.
Is it? And you're young. You're not even old yet.
I don't know. I'm feeling pretty old sometimes, but yeah, I was very blessed. It was a real thrill. The night that I got it, just real quickly, the night that I got the award, to walk on stage, and I still have this on video, and it didn't strike me until I got on stage and I looked down. And Og Mandino, who has passed away now, but he wrote the second biggest, I mean, like if the Bible is the number one best-selling book of all time, Greatest Salesman in the World is supposedly the second biggest selling book in he's standing up applauding, and Zig Ziglar was standing up. And I was like, no, wait a minute, what's wrong with this picture? I'm supposed to be in the audience. It was just, and they were just so amazing. And that was one of the really, really great things about that night, was, and one of the things about our business and that you hope transfers to other businesses is this genuine support and encouragement of other people in your profession.
Well, and that's how I felt really weird when I first met you. Because when we met, it was completely random.
Yeah.
And I think they only picked us because we had the goatees.
I think so.
And,
it was the goatee
and not
club.
only do you have a better voice, you have a better goatee. And you're a better dresser.
It's amazing what you can buy at the drugstore.
Yeah. Well, I know. I'm going to have to, at some point, I'm going to have to, well, I'm probably not going to because my whole deal is being realist.
Yeah.
So I probably will go gray or bald and not worry about it. Because I kind of feel that if you go bald and wear a toupee, how realistic are you being?
Yeah.
And how true to yourself are you being? But when I first met you, they paired us together.
Yeah.
Who I've never met you before.
Right. We haven't met,
And-
and this is how we got.
And
thrown
I'm some
together.
schmo off the street.
Oh, hardly.
Who, if you are a Hall of Famer, I am in the, single A, double A ball. I still got a long way to go. I have no problem with that. It doesn't hurt my self-esteem.
Okay.
You better-
Triple A, but that. Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
well, maybe a call up in the summer. And they wanted me to argue with you over motivation.
Yeah.
The Hall of Fame speaker who speaks on motivation.
And you were great because what ended up coming out was that we felt very much the same way.
Yeah.
And you showed the skill of a classic debater in that.
I'm a master debater.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Exactly. But you were able to take the opposing viewpoint, even if you did not personally believe it, and argue convincingly for it. And that is an incredible talent and incredible skill. And it's an intellectual challenge. I mean, that's...
Well, I think you're giving me a little too much credit.
No,
I'm a cranky bastard, so I can argue with anybody. That's why David asked me to do that.
There you go.
But we did have a lot of similar situations. You were supposed to be for motivation,
Yeah.
and I was clearly supposed to be against motivation. And when that recording is released, I will be either the anti-hero of NSA or I will be out of the whole NSA situation.
Or the realist who finally says the truth.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, I think that's coming down the pike.
But I know when we were arguing, I knew of you, but I didn't know what you spoke on, and because that's one of the things, I'm not real deep into the history of NSA. I'm kind of, I try to make sure I don't get too influenced by too many things because I still want to be true to myself.
Sure.
And I have a tendency of being some kind of like tofu.
I hear you.
Like,
Yep.
like
Same. Yep.
if I'm here, hopefully I can only pray by the end of this, I'll be talking like this and being real smooth because I'm here with you. And I had Vinny Varelli on, and when he started talking, I started doing that stuff
You
too.
do, yeah.
And I have a tendency of doing that.
I go back home to southern Indiana where I grew up just across the river from Louisville, and I end up talking like, it's just, I can't help it. And some of it comes through naturally, but I mean, it's really pronounced there. And I know exactly, it is something how we become sponges, which again gets back to the importance of who do we hang around with and what influences and what are we listening to and I mean, it really is important stuff.
Yeah, because when I talk to my dad on the phone, he's from New Hampshire. It's Pepperidge Farm all over again. Yeah, good to hear from you. Stuff like that. So, and everywhere I go, people are obviously like, "Oh, you don't have an accent," and I go, "Well, I'm a educated person. I'm a professional speaker. I speak for a living. So, I like you have found that sometimes you have to be somewhat accent neutral.
Yes, like the newscaster, you have to put it out there like that. And do you always get? Here's the other one I get. What do you speak about?
Oh, well, yeah.
I go about an hour.
Well,
it's the best I got.
I'm pretty lucky because I have a pretty odd.
Tightly.
Well, I have a pretty odd. When I tell people I talk on negativity and how it's useful, people automatically go, "What? It's useful?" Because especially here in NSA, it really makes people's eyes, twist up in their head because I think as American culture, we've kind of been brainwashed to be too positive, which can get you in trouble. But which is why when we get back to when I met you, you were talking about motivation. And I get tired of the rah, you can do anything kind of person because that's only good for the event at the moment.
Sure.
And then they got to go back to work on, like if it's a Friday, they got to go back to work on Monday, and none of that stuff is retained because it was just, I call it cotton candy.
Yeah.
It tasted great at the time, but there was no value to it. And I thought that's what was going to happen with you. Because he said, "Oh, he's going to be a motivation guy," and then I heard your lovely voice, and I figured, "Oh, he's going to be, in a world, the secret can help you." And it's like, oh, Jesus, please don't let this be that guy. But you are really more of a content person.
I hope so. I think I think one of the crimes is that we've confused enthusiasm with motivation. And there's nothing wrong with being enthusiastic, but that's not the same as motivation. therefore we see enthusiastic people and we say, wow, that person is really motivated. Look how excited they are. Look how up they are. And maybe they never accomplish anything. And by definition, then they haven't been motivated. And so motivation is, I believe motivation is always goal-directed. So you have to have an end result, a purpose in mind. It has to be measurable. It has to be driving you towards something very specific, or else it's
cotton candy.
Yeah, it's cotton candy, man. And hey, not that we all don't like cotton candy every once in a while.
Well, that's what I'm saying. At the event, it's good.
You can't expect it to be long-lasting. You can't expect it to be nutritious. You can't expect it to be anything more. And I think that's where fluff, that's a very appropriate term, because for many, that's exactly what it's been.
And I don't really mind fluff and cotton candy speaking at the beginning of a conference because, like I said, it only motivates you or gets you riled up and excited for a limited time. But at the conference, that's a great thing because that'll get you excited to listen to
content. Yeah, no, I agree completely. And it's I think it's really been unfortunate, too, that we even have the term motivational speaker, because if the speaker was, in fact, what was motivating, then you would also have the right to presume that people in the audience would all be motivated. And we know that's not true. We know that some people sit there and go, wow, that's really inspiring, and they do what it takes to be motivated. There's others that get excited and never do anything. Then there's others that sit in the back with their arms folded going, I've heard this junk a million times before.
That's
right?
me. I'm rolling my eyes going,
this is starfish,
BS.
All that crap. And it's not the speaker that's motivational. The speaker's merely a catalyst to help you motivate yourself. And so if the speaker himself or herself has a misunderstanding about what motivation is, then that's where a lot of these problems come as well. It's, follow me as opposed to trying to give you ideas that are catalysts to help you. And I'm so tired of that in this business and in every business, the people that think that it's about the speaker being motivational as opposed to the speaker really coming with the right purpose to try to influence and help the people in the audience.
And when it comes to motivation, what I always talk to about when I talk to groups, it's not about, for me, it's not about motivation because individuals are motivated by so many different things that it's rare that you're going to get one person up there who's going to motivate everybody or touch everybody in a way. Yep. I like to focus on what is going on in the situation that is demotivating people. Mm-hmm. Because if you think about when you got your first job or whenever you start a new job, how motivated is that person on day one?
Oh, God.
And if they're not, fire the HR person because they hired a bad person. There's two people you got to get rid of.
Right.
And over time, because either they become complacent or they learn it, they get excited in the learning process, and then it becomes routine and rote, and they just get bored. Or policies are implemented. What is demotivating them? What is causing the slide? And I think a lot of people don't focus on the slide because that's negative.
Right. No. And it also proves that the speaker can't be motivational. In that, if I'm the boss and I come in on your first day when you've got all this excitement and say, do this, you'll get fired. Right? I mean, this is
that's on day one?
Yeah, on day one, you're going to go, holy cow, I better get this done because I'm excited. I'm going to do this, right? If you've just gotten an offer for another job and you're just about to give me your 2-week notice and I say, do this or get fired, at that point you're going, well, cut me now, man. So the message was identical. It was the audience that changed. And what happened along the way so therefore it wasn't me saying those words that was motivational. It was totally your situation and your reaction to it. So the speaker is not what's motivational. It's where you are and where you're coming from, and it's exactly what you're saying in terms of, if there's a reason that you've gone from that guy that's so excited that really wants to get it done because you don't want to lose that job to the guy that says take this job and shove it. What happens along that way? I mean, that I think that's a fascinating area to study.
And it bothers me. It scares me a little bit because when you see sales teams, and I actually know my wife worked for a company where the sales director or whatever his position was, he's in charge of all the salespeople, showed him Alec Baldwin from Glengarry Glen Ross.
ABC.
Yeah, always be closing. What's my name? FU is my name. They use that as motivation.
Wow.
And I find that to be probably the most demotivating thing you can say because, what's first place? A trip to Florida. What's second place? Steak knives. What's third place? Hit the road. Yeah. I don't see how that's part of that whole demotivating thing. It's not you're motivating two people. And I find that competition like that can sometimes be beneficial, but most of the time it's very detrimental.
Oh, I think it's totally, it's arrogant, and that's what. There's a great scene in the classic Lonesome Dove where Tommy Lee Jones just gets off his horse and beats the living daylights out of this guy, and the crowd is standing around just so shocked, and he looked up and just says, "I can't stand arrogance in a man." He gets on his horse and rides away. It's like one of my favorites. See, I can't stand arrogance in it, and that's what I hate about that is that when we've all been in those situations where we've had a boss or a leader who the leadership is about them. It's for Alec Baldwin saying that, who was the most arrogant? It wasn't, it was about him. It was about him being able.
What did you drive in here?
Yeah.
This watch costs more than your car.
Your car,
yeah.
exactly. And I don't know how we talk about a demotivator. I think that's for the one or two that might be inspired by that. Again, getting back to what you're talking about, did that move Jack Lemmon? No, it discouraged him in that movie. I mean, it made him want to jump out the window, and so. It just proved that even that motivational speech wasn't motivating to most of the people that heard it.
Yeah, and so it's really, when they talk about a motivational speaker, and like you said, you don't really try to label yourself as that. You're someone who does.
But I get labeled that. You're right. I mean,
they try to label me that, which is like, are you kidding me?
I'm the inverse.
I actually start off my talk, the first 3 minutes, I talk about, oh my God, I know you see negativity up there, and the first thing you're thinking about is, oh my God, they brought in a motivational speaker. Yeah. I am not that. If I could motivate you. If I can motivate everybody in this person with 1 hour speech, you'd have to pay me a lot more than you're paying me today.
There you go.
But I think the stigma needs to be removed from it at some point, because I think what we've done is we had the marketers come in and beat it to death in our industry, and now it is an icky thing. Being a motivational speaker is icky.
Oh yeah.
So what do you think is a good way of? Because you get asked to present all over the world. You just came back from Australia. I guess that was not name dropping. That's country dropping.
There you go.
But you just came back from Australia. You're trying to, with content, show people how they can become better people or how be better at their jobs. What do you see as a trend towards getting away from the rah-rah motivational towards the content motivation?
Well, I think part of the audience, I think most of the audience sits there and thinks, three specific things. Number one, so what do I do next? Okay, good idea. Tell me. I mean, they really want you to say. They want you to be very clear and very specific. I think that's part of what's happening with generational change as well, where the boomers would, tell me what to do, and I'll put my nose to the grindstone and do it, and I'll work. I won't. Today's generation is more like, I'll do what needs to be done, but you really need to tell me what I need to do.
Well, like
right?
I say that we, boomers will give you the answer, and then they give you the history of the answer.
Yeah, so true.
Where, Generation X specifically, we want the answer. Not necessarily you need to show us the steps, but if you can give us the answer, we can find it. And Generation Y, they would like the answer and maybe one or two definitive steps.
Yeah.
It's the older generation that wants to explain, and this is how, and throughout thousands of years, we've done it this way, and we don't care. Just get to the answer.
Get the answer, right? And so I find my audience wants the answer, and then and it's for two reasons, which kind of gets into the second question, is that what qualifies you to give me the answer?
Well, that's true.
So the answer has to be good enough that wrapped within that is your credibility. That they kind of go, yeah, I guess that would work. Okay, so now what do I do? So, what's the answer? What are the steps? And why are you qualified to be giving me this information? Are the three things that every audience wants to know. So if I can talk to you about how you can improve your customer relationships, how you can retain customers at a higher level, and give you some specific ways to do that, how you can differentiate your business, then if I say that in a way that's compelling, then hopefully woven in the fabric of that message is also the motivating factor to help you decide that you want to do what it takes to achieve it.
Now,
does that make sense?
No, it makes sense to me, absolutely. Now, when you do your talks, one of the things that I know you really work hard on is the customization part.
Yeah.
Because that's part of the credibility issue.
Sure it is. Yeah, you want the audience to know that you know who they are.
Now,
right? It's out of respect for one thing, but also they don't want to hear the canned speech. They don't want to think that you could give the identical speech to the XYZ company tomorrow after you've talked to us today.
I was just having this conversation with Robert Bradford this morning. Another name drop. Well, no, but
good name to drop.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
He's been on the show too.
Yeah.
But Robert and I were talking about the way audiences have changed as far as how they want to hear information. If you've seen Robert present, and I know you have, for those of you who don't know, Robert is such an expert in his field that he goes up there with a kind of an outline, but he really walks a very dangerous line. We talked about this. He walks a very dangerous line because he's winging it. Because it's not about the canned speech. It's not about the 3 stories that you're going to do and my signature story and all this stuff. It's about talking. It's about a relationship with the audience. They want to feel a part of the show, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And I think that's more of the trend that we're seeing. I know a lot of people get rehearsed, and even I was watching one lady who was doing improv the other night, and when she was doing improv, she was doing all the movements, and you could tell that she had in her mind at least rehearsed it a couple times.
Sure.
And it got to be a little phony, even though it's supposedly instantaneous. I think audience really want that connection where, yes, there's a couple anecdotes, not stories. Anecdotes are you've got a list of 58 stories you've got, and as you're talking and responding with the audience, something will trigger that instead of I'm going to do story number 7 followed by story 6 and then.
Well, and they say some stand-ups I know say that Robin Williams is one of the most scripted comics out there. Now, the audience would go, oh my gosh, he's probably the least scripted. But the fact is, he's got a couple, 3 lines about, if a guy in the audience is bald. He's got a couple, 3 lines, about if a woman has on a horrible outfit. Well, as he's working the audience, what's the likelihood that somebody is going to be bald? Yeah. What's the likelihood that somebody's going to have a horrible outfit on? It's about 100%. Now, in one audience, the bald guy might be in the front, and as he's working, the woman in the bad outfit might be in the back. In others, they might be sitting together. In others, so when he delivers the line is a variable based upon the situation.
Right, that's the Rolodex I was talking about.
Exactly, yeah. And so, but one of the hardest things in the world to make it look is natural.
Right.
And so to me, when you see someone who is so good at what they do and it seems unrehearsed, those are the best.
Right.
Because that's the hardest thing in the world to do from the platform.
And I think that's the trend the audience is starting to encounter or at least desire more.
Sure. They want to be able to ask a question too. I mean,
absolutely.
They want to be able to have, something and that at this NSA convention, for example, I think it's the problem inherent with the main stage presenter is you get 1,300 people in the audience. How do you get at some point you can't get those people engaged from the main stage. There's just not a way that you can make every one of those 1,300 people feel as though you can in how you present and the intimacy with which you do your program and how you engage them and all that. But that's why for a program and for every organization, you've got to build into the structure learning opportunities as a large group and interactive opportunities as well. And as a speaker, I think at the end of the day, when people evaluate my performance, it's not just the performance on the stage. It's, did I stand out in the hallway and answer everybody's questions? Did I ask them about their business? Did I do a breakout where they could tell me what they thought of what I said or say, hey, here's my situation. How would that work for me? And at the end of that package, then that's when we as a speaker might get evaluated, or it's the value that we would bring to a group. It's not just that time that we're on the stage.
It's access.
It's the access pre and post.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of speakers understand that the access. For me, I like to get there early. I mean, I like to go the night before if I can, if they have a reception and mingle around. I'm not very social, but when they're paying me to be there,
sure,
I'm the most social person in the world.
Yeah.
But I like to get comfortable because, hey, if I know there's someone here and I know, hey, it's Scott. I know Scott. That's great, and I see you in the front row. Yeah. My level of nervousness it makes me more relaxed because it's not me talking in front of a room full of strangers. It's talking in front of Scott, or at least I know there's Scott that there's to help me.
Yeah, right.
Right. But I don't think a lot of speakers recognize the value of them knowing you.
No, I agree completely.
Not just, oh my God, it's Scott McKain. It's Scott from last night.
It's conversational. It is, Scott Stratton is here at this meeting, and he wrote a phenomenal book called Unmarketing, and he, it's don't sell stuff, build relationships. Because when you do that, guess what happens? People buy in. Now, am I talking about buying me? Well, no, they're buying into the message. That's the key.
They're buying into the fact that you have credibility, who you are. Yeah. They're buying Scott McKain, exactly. Not necessarily Scott McKain's book or Scott McKain's talk. They're just buying you as a person.
Right. But let's go back to what that means in terms of everybody's business. For me over the years, what it means is these people feel like they know you, so they feel really comfortable recommending you to other people. And that's the essence of why I've been able to do this almost 30 years, is that people have felt comfortable saying, because it is kind of uncomfortable to raise your hand and recommend, whether it's a speaker or whether it's an automobile or a movie or a, anything.
I mean, I have had people ask me to recommend them, and I've known them as a person,
right? But not seen them.
But I've never seen them speak, and I'm like, I haven't seen you speak. I can't.
Yeah.
And they get kind of offended because I've known them for years.
Sure.
But it's like, I've never seen you speak. If this is my life. This is my life. I can't go around just recommending anybody I know. I can say, oh, so and so's a great person.
Right. Exactly.
If you want to give them $100, you'll know that if you come back 3 days from there, they'll still have that money for you.
Yeah.
But it gets to the point where you can't recommend because I can't put myself out there, my credibility out there too much.
I agree completely. There are a lot of people that I like, and I've never seen at this convention, but I've never seen them speak to civilians.
Oh, civilians!
I mean, speaking to speakers is different than speaking to civilians. I mean, because just like my dad was a terrific guitar player, but it was just maddening to listen to music with him or go to a concert with him because he watched the guitar player completely differently than I enjoyed the experience.
Well, I do that with stand-up. I can't go do stand-up anymore.
Yeah,
I'm not looking at the enjoyment of the performance.
Right.
I'm looking at pacing. I'm looking at timing. I'm looking at how he connected two premises together, segues.
Where the callback comes.
Which is why when we had Jimmy Pardo on last night, Jimmy doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Jimmy is purely, I mean, he's got his Rolodex as well, but he's got stuff up there. He just wings it. I mean, he spent the first 5 minutes talking about how badly lit the building was. And as a speaker, we all know that's you run into these horrible conference rooms. But he's so natural and free flowing, and he does it for a living that he can wing it. And I can focus on his performance and not. Well, why do you choose that particular word?
Exactly. Yeah. But we do that as speakers, and so there are some people that are successful in speaking to speakers because we walk into the audience and go, "Oh, that's Jane Doe. Oh, she's such a great person," and so we're warm and very. But you put Jane Doe on a platform with 3 or 4 other
Oklahoma Farm Bureau,
the Oklahoma Farm Bureau with 2 or 3 top other pros, and they're like dogs looking at ceiling fans, when she's on stage, and you're exactly right. In any line of work, you have to be incredibly. The worst thing I can do is to do a bad job professionally for my clients. But the second worst thing I could do is recommend someone who comes in and does a bad job for clients, and I just won't do it.
Now I remember from the conference in Atlanta several months ago, I went to your bureau presentation that you talked about, and you started off a lot different than I did. When you started off, you pretty much exclusively worked with bureaus.
That was my first speech. My mentor in the business, even before I got in NSA, was a guy named Grady Nutt, and this was back in the early 80s, late 70s, in fact.
Sounds like a ball player.
Yeah.
Played third base for the Cleveland Indians, Grady Nutt, didn't he?
Grady was a great guy. One of his lines was, it's NUTT, that second T may not be much to you, but it's the world to me. And he was just my late wife and I were married in his living room, making us a couple literally married at the nut house.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a matter of fact, the Gospel Music Association, their Humorist of the Year award is called the Grady Nutt Award. Grady was killed in a plane crash in '82. But Grady was exclusive with a small bureau in Louisville. Matter of fact, Mike McKinney is the guy's name, and Mike was a reporter for the Louisville Courier-Journal. Came out to do a story about Grady. They hit it off so well that Grady said, "I'll set you up in business if you'll book me, and you can make extra money by booking other people." And so when Grady discovered me and got me started.
And how did he discover you?
I was a national officer of the Future Farmers of America.
Oh, the FFA.
The FFA, and you take in Indiana, you take a year off to be state president, and then you take another year off of college to be a national officer. And so in Indiana, you probably do 200 free speeches that year, and as a national FFA officer, you do 1,000 free speeches during your year. I mean, the average day.
That would be 3 to 4 a day.
Yeah, your average day is you get up, you do a morning.
Every day.
Every day, yeah. You get up and do a morning breakfast or Kiwanis Club. Then you do 2 high school assemblies. Then you do a noon luncheon for a Rotary Club.
I was going to say, I don't think there's enough people in Indiana to do that.
But you're traveling nationally.
Okay.
The year I was a national officer, I spoke in 40 states and 3 countries.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, it is like, there's a joke among FFA national officers. It's the Miss America of agriculture. Because, I mean, they just stand you up and for every farm group, or
Miss
or
Jersey
education.
Cow.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of how you are, And so I was speaking to the Illinois FFA convention, and Grady was the evening speaker. And unbeknownst to me, when I'm speaking in the afternoon, just like we were talking earlier, Grady slid in the back of the room, and it's the assembly hall. I mean, there's 3,000 people in the audience. He slides in the back and hears my speech just to get a sense of where he's speaking that night. I didn't know him. He gave that night, maybe to this day, the best speech I ever heard. I mean, there's 3 or 4 speeches that I've been in that I can't decide which is the best, but that's one of the 3 or 4 best I've ever heard. The audience was berserk. I mean, the old line, throwing babies in the air, pulling down the goalposts, ripping up the
throwing
turf.
babies in the air.
I mean, they were just berserk, and I just had to meet him. And I walked up, and the first thing this guy said to me is, "You ought to be doing this for a living." And I said, do what for a living? He said, "No, I heard your speech today.
You can do that?"
And the most amazing thing was, he said, "And I'll help." And how many times do people say, this was a life lesson for me, how many times do people say, "Hey, I encourage you," but they never say that second part of it, "Let me help"?
Well, for me, I come from an acting background, and I've tried to explain this to my wife when she's gone on job interviews, and I go, unless they sign a contract,
exactly.
It's never a done deal, because there's so many people here who go, "Oh yeah, I'll help you out." I mean, they'll say it,
exactly,
but then there's no follow up, or when you do follow up, they just kind of and that's like that, especially in collaborations with I mean, people will eventually you will obviously get a collaboration, you'll work and do a great thing with somebody, but until there's a contract, until it's actually done, and maybe that's just me being negative, but until it's actually done, I always assume, because I've had so many people say, "Oh, I've got this role for you," or we're going to do this movie, or we're going to have this video series that we're going to do, and then
exactly. And when you're in that position, I'm 20 years old at the time, and you speak in front of so many corporate people in agriculture who say, "Oh, we need a young person like you. So when you get done with college, you give me a call." And I'd heard from other officers from years past, Mark Mayfield being one of them. If you know Mark, the speaker, he was a National FFA officer the year before me. We've known each other since we were 18. You kind of go, "Oh, thank you," but nothing's going to happen, right? I mean, you just know they're being nice, and you accept it for just that. And that's what I thought this was. And about 2 months later, my phone rings, and Grady said, I thought you were going to call me. How can I help you if you won't pick up the phone?" Okay. And so I started exclusively with McKinney Associates in Louisville. They booked my first speech, speaking of Farm Bureau, Kentucky Farm Bureau, $250 plus mileage at 18 cents a mile. That's what you got.
Dang,
back then.
that's not it ain't that much better now.
I just thought, how in the world could I spend this much money? This is just, I cannot make more money than this.
Yeah, at 25 years old, that's a fortune. Someone just won the lotto.
Exactly. I wanted to run to the car after I got the check for fear they'd go, "Wait a minute.
Cash this quick before they cancel it."
$25, not $250. And so that was the start of my career. And as Grady's career grew and people couldn't afford him, he'd go, "Hey, there's this young guy, though, that you ought to." And so it gets back to what you were saying earlier about recommendations. He was willing to recommend me. And that's how it all got started.
And it's always fascinating to me, because I've gotten smaller versions of that. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously I wouldn't be anywhere without some help, but I haven't had that one major turning point. And it always fascinates me and always gets you exciting when you hear about that, because it makes you feel good knowing there's people out there, not you, Grady. There's people, because you're not helping me. I'm just kidding, Scott. But I mean, there's people like Grady out there that are so well established that actually go out of their way to help, and you really appreciate how rare that is.
Oh, it's so rare. But one of the other things is too, the business has changed so much. Our business, like every other business out there, I think it's harder to do today for 2 reasons. Number one is, back then there weren't that many people wanting to be speakers, because nobody really knew what
the hell it was.
Yeah, I mean, but you're
now you get paid. I get that. You get paid to do that.
You get paid to do that, and that's part of why they say, "Oh, you're a motivational speaker," is because motivational speakers are all they're really familiar with, right?
Well, because they got the infomercials,
Tony Robbins, and the stuff like that, and so that's why they say that, because it's the only experience. But there's so many. The whole thing is Cabot Robert, the founder of NSA, said that. We're going to grow the pie. Well, I don't think he ever had an inkling how many people be eating pie.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a lot of pie.
There's a lot of people trying to eat
back
that
then.
Pie
You only had to make a couple slices. Now you gotta.
When I'm immediately sounding like my dad walking to school. All right, but
in my day,
but the first brochure we sent out, marketing brochure. There's 92 counties in Indiana, and we sent a brochure to the 92 county soil and water conservation districts because each of them had an annual banquet. And each of them spent somewhere between $200 and $300 on their speaker. And that was my, right? So I sent out 92 brochures. 89 called me. They'd never seen a speaker's brochure before. You must really want to speak to our meeting if you sent us a letter. And now these people are probably getting 10 a day.
Now it's the inverse. It's
exactly
11% of those people call back, and even then,
right?
and even then we don't have budget.
Right, now they're trying to negotiate you down, or would you do it for nothing? And so it has changed so much, and I think it is so much harder to get started now, and it's so much harder to maintain your level now than it's ever been before.
Well,
I'm so glad I got started when I did.
Well, that makes me feel so much better.
Well, but the other thing is,
I feel inspired now.
But the other thing is the opportunity. The way that you grew your career then was I would do all these meetings in Indiana, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you would hope that they would talk to the people from other states. Now, because of what we're doing right now,
you can email or look people up and
you
Google.
You mentioned Australia earlier, and so All Country Drive. I mean, the funny thing is that thing booked 3 weeks before the event.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was a guy that had been to a meeting, an executive of the company in Australia had been to a meeting that I did in New Orleans and got back, and they're planning the conference, and he goes, I heard this guy in New Orleans. We really got to have him in our meeting.
I mean, I've had turnarounds in the States, but international, that's a.
But the point is that we're at the point that him going, let's bring this guy in to speak. The fact that I was 10,000 miles away was irrelevant because I could be there tomorrow. It's a.
Well,
okay,
that's because they're in the future,
today, right?
They're in the future, so
the flight got back sooner than we left. It was like the strangest.
Oh my
thing.
Lord, I'm younger.
I'm in time. I'm going back in time. But it's the travel now, the global community now. It's just amazing to me how. To go to Australia and give a speech is now no different than going to Chicago. I mean,
especially with all the delays. Think of it going to Sheboygan, Wisconsin, where you have the 2 layovers. Because as soon as you have the 2 layovers, you've got a full day of flying.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what going to Australia is like. And before we go, because I really appreciate your time. No, we got plenty of time. I just wanted to make sure I since I have you here, you're one of the few speakers that I get to have spoken to that speaks to thousands of people at once on a regular basis. I mean, you talk to big audiences all the time. You started out talking to big audiences you were talking about. Because a lot of the people I talk to rooms 2, 4, 600. Often, on occasion, you'll get in a 1,000 plus. But for me, I'm not at that level where I'm walking out in front of 3,000 people at a huge Las Vegas convention center. And I know you do that quite often and have in the past. How do you prepare yourself for a bigger audience versus a smaller audience? Because I know that some people struggle with a small audience. Because like I can do anywhere from 4 people to, in my mind, the most I've ever spoken to people was 72,000 people. I worked for the Astrodome, and I spoke, and they put me on the Jumbotron every Thursday when we'd get the UPS. The UPS people, you'd get better seats.
Yeah.
I can't remember of course I can't remember my lines, but it was one of those deals where at the beginning of the game you'd go find a family, and the UPS would be fast shipping, and then we'd give them the upgrade. And so I had no problem speaking in front of at the time if it was a full game 72,000, but that's rare for 3 seconds. How do you prepare for knowing that you're going to be speaking to several hundred versus a group like a chapter meeting where you've got 60?
Oh yeah, and the group I had before Australia was 25 folks in Chicago. So it's and I love the variety. This makes bigger audiences are easier than smaller audiences.
That's what I was thinking, but
it really
people scares people.
Yeah, it really, because if you're putting 5,000 people in a room, I just did Navistar dealers, and there was right at 5,000, I think, in the ballroom. You're going to have the best sound, you're going to have the best lights, you're going to have the best everything because you got so many people there. So from that technical standpoint, it's easier for a speaker. But the other thing is, you always have that image magnification. And so when I first started speaking, what you had to do with a bigger audience was to get bigger, right? I mean, your gestures had to be bigger, your everything had to be bigger because the people in the back had to be able to see that you were making, this dramatic swoop. Now, because of image magnification, it's almost like it's a television broadcast.
Yeah.
And so the way you connect with that big audience is to be more intimate.
Well, I was thinking that because half the time especially once you get over a certain size, they usually have a video screen.
Right. That's
And
yeah.
and now all of a
that's
sudden,
what they're watching is the
Right.
video screen,
They
not
think-
you on the stage.
which as a speaker, their egos sometimes are, oh, they must be looking at me. It's like I do that at concerts. I'm like, I was at a U2 concert and I'm watching the video screen going, wait a second, this is the only time I'm going to see Bono.
Yeah, there
Start
he
paying
is.
attention to
No,
Bono.
I'll never forget. It was California, Nevada, Hawaii, Kiwanis. There's this convention of those 3 states go together and have their convention. And it was the very first meeting many years ago that I did that had the image magnification first time. And it's the strangest thing because the people on the front row, I thought, I'm bombing. They're not even looking at me. But what I realized is they were looking around me to watch me on the screen. We are such a culture of media and of television and all that even in a live situation, just like you with U2, we are just naturally attracted to watch it on the screen. But in a way, it's because it makes it more intimate. It gives everybody a front row seat. It lets us be right there with that person. And so, I encourage everybody in business to think about, it almost seems like the inverse, right? A bigger audience is going to be more nerve-wracking. It's going to be, well, really, it's the inverse. It is less nerve-wracking because bigger audiences are easier, are better. They walk in expecting that it's going to be great because, you wouldn't put somebody bad in front of a group this size, right? I mean, so I spoke with Mark Mayfield earlier. Mark's master's thesis was on what makes a meeting great. And he considered, I think it was 12 variables. And really did an intensive study on what made a meeting great. And the number one thing was tradition. If last year's meeting was fabulous and you had fabulous speakers, the people walk in this year's meeting expecting that these people are going to be good. And one meeting planner called it the Bob Hope effect. And Mark didn't know what that meant. And the meeting planner said, well, Bob Hope didn't say anything funny for the last 10 years of his life, but you still laughed. It was Bob Hope.
Right.
You've
been conditioned. Pavlov's comedy theory.
Exactly right. And so, therefore, it's the same way with a meeting or with speakers, is if you've had, if they've had Joe Calloway and Mark Sanborn the year before, basically I can walk in and, scratch my nose and people are going to like it because, it's got to be good. Look how good those guys were last year. This guy has to be good. So that part really helps.
And Seinfeld kind of went that when he ended the show and he started doing stand-up, he was getting irritated because people were laughing at his bad stuff.
That he knew
wasn't that good because he was trying to work it out, but they were laughing hysterically at it because it was
him.
Seinfeld.
Yeah.
And the worst case scenario of this, and I've seen this, is I once opened at a comedy club for Pauly Shore.
Oh wow, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it was definitely not the highlight of my career.
Top on your resume.
Yeah, but half the audience was there because it was a comedy show, and the other half were Pauly Shore fans.
Yeah.
The Weasel.
Yeah.
And they literally would have laughed if he had read the phone book.
Yeah.
And he was horrible. He was awful. And because the other half people were like, "Oh God," and they weren't real happy with it because I could hear him mumbling on the way out.
Yeah.
But it's that situation where they know it's going to be good, and in fact they want it to be good, especially at a business meeting. They don't want to go in there. They kind of expect, oh my God, I hope this is not boring.
Right.
Last year was great. I hope it's not boring. So they want it to be good.
Yeah.
And with your magnification, I think what people need to keep and remember is that you have to, if you're being magnified, if you're being shown on a screen, you need to make it smaller.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Crazy
stuff.
It's the inverse of what used to work. I used to say that speaking from the platform and speaking on camera were two separate skills, two completely different skills.
Not anymore.
But not anymore, because so much of what you're doing is on camera, and it's so similar now. Do stand-up audiences, if I may ask you a question.
No, you can ask me anything you want.
Because one of the things, stand-up audiences, sometimes it's almost an adversarial relationship with the audience, where I think in business speaking, they want you to do well. I mean, they turn on you if you don't. You waste their time, but they want you to do well.
It is definitely adversarial. They want to see a good show, but they want to challenge you.
Yeah.
They believe heckling is helping you. Why? Because often a good comedian, like Jimmy Pardo we just saw the other night, when something happened outside of the act, he was hilarious.
Yeah.
And actually, that's kind of my forte. Is I was much better off my material than on my material. So if people were reacting or heckling, I mean, I won Houston's Funniest Person in a contest, and the reason I won is I was heckled in the middle of it, and it was the most giving audience the entire time because they're full of people's friends.
Yeah.
They respect the fact that everybody's trying to win, so no one really. But I did get heckled in the middle of I was the only one to get heckled in the middle of it, and I hammered the guy
Yeah.
in an expert way, and then right before I left, I hammered him for no reason, because just to show him who was
that
boss.
good, yeah.
and I believe that's what won.
Yeah.
But I believe that kind of culture is and I haven't gone to a comedy club in a long time because they kind of drive me crazy now.
Sure.
Because of we talked about
Inside,
earlier.
yeah.
I'm more paying attention to their technique than I am their act. But I think it was definitely adversarial because they want to be part of the show and they want to see you react, because quite often that organic, off the cuff, in the moment, you'll never see it anywhere else. It's the only time you'll ever see this. This is a magic moment shared between you and the performer, and no one else will. Just everyone in the room see it, nobody else. That, I think, is what people really like. And so when they start heckling and when they start being, they want to see you fail a little bit to get you on your heels, so you'll fight.
Get you on your game.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite? I mean, it's unfair to say your favorite. Like, you have to pick one. But who are 2 or 3 that you just go, wow? That make you go
historically or now?
So good. Yeah, both.
Well, historically, I've always loved Robin Williams.
Yeah.
I've always loved Robin Williams from the day I saw him, because he was I saw him when I was a little kid, so he was always goofy and animated and fun.
Yeah.
And we just saw him about 2 weeks before he had his heart procedure.
Oh, no kidding.
We saw George Carlin, another person I love, and my father was nice enough to show me George Carlin when I was very young, despite the profanity and everything. Well, I'm from the Northeast. That's not really profanity.
Yeah.
That's punctuation. And so George Carlin is a master, and we saw him about a month before he passed away.
Oh, my goodness.
So if you're a comedian in Houston, do not allow me to attend. Bad things will happen. But right now, Mark Maron, who also does a podcast and inspired me to do the podcast, he's a great comedian. Jimmy Pardo we saw last night, very funny guy. I really appreciate people who can wander out into the crowd, so to speak, and do that balancing act that kind of goes against the grain here at the National Speakers Association when it's signature story situation.
3 points in a poem. Kind of
yeah,
thing.
I appreciate someone who can really organically and in the moment present something of talent.
Yeah.
I mean, I incorporate sections of my talk specifically for me to wander.
Yeah.
Because it's fun, and I'd get bored. Not that my talk is very structured, but I have an outline and I have PowerPoints and things like that. But I purposely do that because, I can go back, and I can go back on the same program, and they'll get something different. They know they will get something different because they go, well, he was making fun of Joe because of his this, and that won't happen. I mean, they know that it's going to be different.
Right.
But it's also, for me, it's entertaining, and I find that they get that. Only there would you have seen this feeling.
Yeah, it's that juxtaposition is interesting because when you were saying your favorite, one of my favorites was Schimmel.
Oh, I worked with Schimmel. He was the first. Robert Schimmel was the first person I ever worked with professionally.
No kidding.
He was amazing. He very nice guy, very sweet guy.
Well, I had seen him pre-cancer. Right.
Right.
I
worked with him in '95. It was pre.
And then I lost my wife to cancer, and her best friend and I went to see him when he was doing his appearances after cancer. Mm-hmm. And so she is the ex-wife of a morning radio personality in Indianapolis. Is syndicated all over, Bob and Tom, all over the country.
Oh, I know Bob and Tom.
Yeah, and so Betsy, Tom's ex-wife. And so Robert knew Betsy through that. So we end up for an hour just talking about how families deal with cancer. He was the sweetest guy, but the reason I bring that up is because there was one bit that he did before that I wanted to hear him do again. And as an audience member, it really, if you ever saw Sinatra, my God, he better sing My Way. If he doesn't do My Way, you're mad. I mean,
there's definitely the greatest hits aspect of it. Absolutely.
And I think sometimes that we forget, no matter what business we're in, but we forget as speakers, as performers, that even though we might not want to do that signature story, if there are people in the audience that kind of expect.
It's like Carlin was like that.
They
all wanted to hear the 7 words you can't say. I told you.
Yeah, and it's a trap in some ways, but I think we have to get to the point where, and the decisions we make may be different, but I've got this story about Taxi Terry, and part of the reason the guy flew me to Australia, because the guy working for the guy that brought me over there said, hey, you got to tell that story, because he's told everybody that story, and how you can't wait until Scott tells the story. and frankly, I wasn't going to tell that particular group. But I almost feel like, do you take requests?
Yeah. It's definitely that balance. That's why
it is.
I mean, I'm not a big fan of signature stories myself, only because that's my perspective. But I also know that there's a reason why everyone talks about signature stories so much is because audiences like them.
Yeah.
Not every audience likes them, but a majority of them. They wouldn't be doing it for 20 years if someone didn't like it. But if you can have pieces where there's a story, and then it's filled in with all the fun, what I call the fun stuff, the fun interactive things, and I go out in the audience and to show how people remember negative things more than positive things, I'll go and make fun of somebody and I'll say 4 nice things and 1 bad thing, and then I usually try to...
Which do you remember?
Which do you remember? And I try to say something funny about what they're wearing. I have a couple set things I have over the years. I've made fun of so many people that I have, like, oh, that tie's not ugly. Looks like the casino floor. Or anybody wears any of those Madras shirts? It's like, oh, my grandmother had lawn chairs just like it. Stuff like that. But people like that interactive part. And then I do have things where when I go through, I talk about that. They're not signature stories because they're not long enough and they're not really, as fleshed out, because I prefer to get to the information. That's how I speak.
Sure.
So,
but I think there's signature lines.
Yeah, there's definitely signature lines. That's why you're talking about is where the greatest hits.
Yeah.
So I definitely have topics that I do over and over again and that people like, and they go, oh yeah, you did that last year, and oh, you did it this year, but they don't complain about it.
Exactly. They dig it because But I think where people cross the line is, we've heard so much about the power of story, and you have to be the storyteller, that we then take the pendulum too far and think, well, a speech then is a series of stories.
Yeah.
That's the most boring speaker to me. Is now here's another story about.
Yeah.
I don't want another story right then. I want to know how this story. Give me how I'm supposed to use the moral.
Right, because when you were talking about the signature points, they don't want the signature 20-minute drawn out ordeal.
Yeah.
They want the signature punchline or the signature point that really crystallizes what you're trying to say in a condensed version. They don't want the 20-minute version, because that does get boring if you've heard that story, especially if you know where the payoff's going to be.
Exactly.
But if the payoff's a lot shorter and you don't have to wait as long, it's not nearly as intolerable.
Yeah.
Well, this whole experience has not been intolerable. I really appreciate you being here.
Scott McKain, he's not intolerable. That's my new catchphrase.
That's your new book.
That'll
be your new book.
Not intolerable.
And speaking of that, you've got a couple books out.
Yeah.
Can you tell us the names of the latest one you've got?
The latest one is Collapse of Distinction. It's stand out and move up while your competition fails. And it takes a look at why do customers have such a tough time telling the difference between one competitor and another, and it's because everybody looks alike. So what do we need to do to stand out? So we looked at distinctive organizations and found there were 4 major things that they did that their competitors weren't doing. The other book, I'm doing the revision of it now, and we're going to re-release, I can't even believe it's been this long, but it'll be the 15th anniversary edition of my first book, All Business is Show Business. And it takes a look at how show business really is the metaphor, and it was the first book out there that used showbiz as the metaphor of what all businesses should be: the connection with the audience, the preparation that it takes to deliver the performance, all of those kinds of things.
It ain't a deal until the contract's signed.
Exactly what you were saying, and that's a part of it too. And the choice about whether you're going to be a director or a writer or a performer or all of the above. Are you entrepreneurs being all of the above? Where are you going to be and how? And one of the things that really struck me, just real quickly, about show business too, that continues to this day, is that people will go, "Oh, well, my business isn't show business. Do you want my cardiologist to tap dance his way into my bypass?" And show business made Schindler's List. Was that a laugh riot to you? I mean, if it was, something's wrong. Show business made Silence of the Lambs. The purpose wasn't to make you.
Now
laugh.
That was a laugh riot.
Well,
Come on.
The feel-good hit of the summer, right? But show business, the goal of show business is to make you feel, to make the emotional connection. Sometimes it's laughter, like what you did at comedy clubs and that. I mean, sometimes it's other, and so we have to decide what the appropriate emotional response is to the audience. But 99% of businesses I say this to the speakers: what's the emotional response that you desire from your audience? And work backwards from there, as opposed to, hey, I got this great story. Well,
yeah.
Who cares? I mean, you've got to think about how it makes the audience feel. So anyway, I got off on a tangent.
No,
but
that's what this whole show is, a tangent.
cool. That's why I dig it. It's
So I really appreciate you. They can find you at scottmckain.com.
yeah, it's McKain. ScottMcKain.com.
And you blog incessantly.
Yeah.
And you video
Addicted
blog.
to blogging.
Yeah, you video
Yeah,
blog.
yeah,
You
thank
also regularly. I wish I had your commitment to blogging as much as you do. I wrote my book, and then I felt drained. And it's, So
yeah. Can I tell you a quick story about that? Early on in my career, I was booked on, it was a FFA convention. They were having me come back a few years after I'd gotten out of FFA to speak, and Zig Ziglar was the other speaker. So Zig says, you and your wife want to go to dinner? I'd like to take you guys to dinner, which is kind of like being, the utility infielder for the Class A team. And Derek Jeter says, "What do you do?" Well,
Yeah.
let me check my watch.
It was kind of like when Michael Jordan went to play baseball down in the minor leagues.
Exactly, you're right. It's like what. So we go to dinner, and he said, "Scott, I haven't seen your book. Where's your book?" I said, "Well, I don't have a book." And he said, "I don't either. I've never written a book." And I'm thinking, the guy's losing it. I've got 8 on my shelf. He said, "No." He said, "But writing a book seems so daunting." And he said, "I'll tell you what I did do. I got up this morning and I wrote a page. And tomorrow morning I'll get up and I'll write a page. And you know what? By the end of the year, they tell me I got a book."
Yeah.
And he said, and so that's kind of how I got into blogging. Was I can't write a book today, but I can write a page.
Well, that's how I got my book. My book is 2007 to 2009, maybe 10 of blogs.
Yep.
But it was also one of those things where once you had to go back and re-edit it and move it along, and I am horrible at revisiting my stuff.
Yeah.
I'm more of a get it out
Yeah.
and let someone else play with it.
Yeah.
And usually it's not that bad the first time. I mean,
right.
I feel fortunate that I can kind of spew it out pretty much in a palatable form. I can get some people to polish it up, sprinkle some sugar on it, and so people really like it.
Yeah.
So
don't you feel like you're a better writer now as the more you do it? It's a muscle. I
guess it's just I never really I never really thought I was that good of a writer to begin with, because a lot of it is written as I speak. So it's not really my writing; it's me speaking and transcribing, and then of course there are slight variations on how you talk versus how you read things.
Sure.
But even with mine, I'm constantly doing tangents. So in my book, it's full of footnotes that are tangents because I didn't want to distract people with my own stupid tangents, so I have little footnotes to do that. But I appreciate you being here. Your books, you got one out, you got one coming out, scottmckain.com.
Thanks.
I really appreciate it. And now I'm going to have to learn how to speak better. It's the Scott McKain Show. Can you just do reality check with Craig Price?
Hey, it's Reality Check with Craig Price. Thanks for listening.
Awesome. I want to thank Scott for being on the show. I feel motivated. Do you feel motivated? I feel more motivated now. Yet it's because of all the information I learned about Scott. See? It can work. You can find us at realitycheckpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the newsletter. It comes out once a month. You can also get the RSS feed or subscribe directly to iTunes, so have it downloaded to your computer or your MP3 player or your iPhone. Until next week, this is Craig Price. We'll see you again.
It's Reality Check with Craig Price.